Morning, everyone. So I'm going to talk about my specific part of the seating in the visitor viewing room during the Apollo restoration. So my story with the chairs is relatively new. Their history goes back much further. So let's see. Okay. So July 20th, 2019 marked the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 spaceflight that landed the first humans on the moon. Pilots Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins, along with Commander Neil Armstrong, formed the American crew that on July 20th, 1969 landed the Apollo lunar module Eagle on the moon's surface. So this Apollo 11 effectively ended the space race and fulfilled a national goal proposed by President John F. Kennedy in 1961. So Building 30 at the Lyndon B. Space Center, Houston, or as it's known now as the Christopher C Kraft Jr. Mission Control Center, is where the history was made. Prior to liftoff, missions were controlled from the Launch Control Center at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Responsibility for the boosters and spacecraft remained with the LCC until the boosters had cleared the launch tower, when responsibility was handed over to NASA's Mission Control Center here at the JSC in Houston. So the third floor of Building 30, called MOCR2, or Missions Operation Control Center 2, is where the men and women observed, discussed, and handled missions such as Apollo 11, the low Earth orbit flights of Gemini in the mid-60s, and the shocking loss of Grissom, White, and Chaffee of Apollo 1. So Missions Operation Control is, you saw this diagram earlier, and just as a reference, the whole restoration of Apollo, this diagram, my part with it. So here you have the main control, the back cave is back here, here's the two side rooms, and then behind this piece of glass here is the room that was known as the visitor viewing room. And this room was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1985. In 1992, MOCR2 was decommissioned and opened up to public tours as a stop, open to a stop on public tours by Space Center Johnson. And just looking at the history of this room, thinking about the people that have gone through it, from when it opened into the 60s until my first look at it was in 2014, it's estimated over 1 billion people went through the visitor viewing room and sat in the chairs that were in there. So it's a long history with it. So here's the room in 1992 when it was decommissioned. And then my drawing when I went and saw the first look at it was in 2014. So this room, the visitor viewing room, is where individuals, engineers, scientists, family members of the astronauts could go into the room, sit in these chairs, and look into mission control. Over the years, the seats in the VVR have held queens and presidents, engineers and scientists, celebrities, and tourists. And so looking at the diagram, the first row of seating is 16, then we have 14, 13, 14, and 13, and that eats up to the 74 seats that are in this chair, or 74 seats that are in the room. So this was my first look in 2014 when an RFQ was put out, and this project is a little different scope than what I normally do, but my parents encouraged me to just go down, have a look at the RFQ, see what was going on, and see if I might be interested in bidding on it. And so when I walked into this room for the first time, looking or hearing the history of the room, hearing the scope of the RFQ, my first view of the seats that were almost 50 years old at this time, you know, if these seats could talk, they would say, "Give me a bath." It was just that, the amount of stains, dirt, after 50 years that were on these seats, it was just, to me, unbelievable. So here's further close-up of what I found. A lot of unknown dirt staining, probably a lot of coffee, sodas, cigarette, grease, oil, human, just bodily functions on these seats from being sit down from over 1 billion people having sat there. And so looking at this, you can see there was also other in-ground stains, open seams from the fabric, but otherwise the fabric was fairly in good condition. The ashtrays that are on the back of the seats, they were still mostly functional, but most of them were missing their lids. And probably people grabbed them for souvenirs. Many of the chairs, while they may have still been able to rock and function, they didn't function as they should. And they were pulling away from the floor, or they caved into the one next to them. So as I took note and pictures with my camera, returned to my studio, wrote down my findings, suggestions, and cost estimates, and sent in my report. So the next year, 2015, I get an email saying, hey, there's a new contact for this. We just want to make sure that we have your contact information. So the next year, same thing. So 2017, I was asked to go back down to the MOCR2, look at the seats, and to consider the project from a different viewpoint. Instead of the original, which was really an upholstery job, they wanted me to look at it as a preservation and to consider this as a museum as it should be. And so I wrote down my findings, sent it back in for that. And then in 2018 was when things picked up. I got calls, emails, we're going daily, saying this project is coming to a head, we need to get ready for this to come to your studio. So I decided on a 4-person team. We loaded up our cars, we went down. I contracted with Brad and Stephanie of Studio 6 Art Conservation out of Dallas to help me with the wood and metal parts of the chairs. We went down, I brought Mia Elvington with me. She was working contractually with me at the time, and went down, looked at the chairs. We had a day and a half of safety training. Which if you work on NASA campus, then everyone goes through safety training. So I don't recommend it, it was not fun. But once a day and a half of safety training was passed, and we had a half day to be able to get the seats unbolted from the floor, packed up, and ready for the van the next day. So the seats were then, we tagged everything with these little blue chips that I found. We wanted to be able to number the seats, but we didn't want to touch the seats too much at this time. As you can see, they were still pretty, we hadn't really looked at them yet. They were dirty, and just for our safety as well, we just went ahead and put a tag on each seat right here on one of the arms, and then just loaded everything up. So here it is, bringing the seats into my studio. I built some shelves specific to the seats to be able to house all 74 and all their components in my studio. So we're now in October 2018, the seats are in my studio, and I was told that they needed to be back at JSE by June 2019 for the opening celebrations in the next month. So I had about 7 months to take the seats apart, figure out what was going on, do the restoration, the preservation, the cleaning, fabricate any parts that we may need, and get them back to the JSE. So we went through systematically and deinstalled every chair. We took it apart all the way down to the foam cushions, took everything apart, analyzed it, tagged it, figured out what was going on, making sure things were still in good condition. And so as we took these apart, I started finding these numbers on the armrest, on the seat pan, on the side of the seat pan. When we were finding these numbers, and they're patent numbers. And so I was able to trace these patent numbers, became very helpful in figuring out what these seats were and how they would function. So the patent numbers led me to the American Seating Company, which American Seating was originally founded as Grand Rapids School Furniture in 1886. In 1906, the name is changed to the American Seating Company and is located in Grand Rapids, Michigan. In 2016, the arm of the American Seating Company that manufactured this style of seats was sold to Irwin Seating Company. And so tracking all this information down led me to Bruce Carpenter, who then, he was the project coordinator with Irwin Seating Company, but he had previously worked at the American Seating Company for 40 years. And so talking to him, we were able to get original information of the seats, how they were supposed to work, and figure out what was going on with them. So here's the seats taken apart into the different components. So we have the wood back, we have the seat back, seat cushion, seat pan, and all the other parts. These are the spring arms here. And the spring arms was what made this seat much different than a lot of the other seats and what they got the patent with. So if you look at the seats you're sitting in now, they're very similar where the seats pull down to sit down, but what made these seats special is that once you sat down in them, they also reclined. And it was that spring arm in function of the seats that allowed those seats to recline. And this is one of the main parts that wasn't functioning when we saw it. So here's taking the seats apart. And so the wood back, the seat metal pans, and the ashtrays, they all went to Studio 6, and I handled the rest. So you can see here with the seats, taking the cushions off, this foam, original foam in the seats, in the armrest covers had all degraded. So the body form, working with Bruce Carpenter, we figured out which style of seat that this was and how these were supposed to function. And he was he appointed himself as the historian of the company, and so he was actually knew so much about how things worked, he was able to go and find the original molds for the seam forms. And so instead of where we were thinking we were going to have to carve all of new forms for these seats, he's like, no, I know where this is. And so he just went and made me all new body form seat foam cushions for inside the seats. So that was a really great getting to work with Bruce and talk to him about it. So we have the foam now, but we have to clean all of this upholstery. And because this was a preservation job, we did not want to have to make new fabric. We wanted to preserve what was there. And so this is a testing shot of us going through different surfactants of how to clean 50 years of dirt off of these fabric, then to be able to make them look and visually look new without going against what was there. And so used individual surface cleaning, spot cleaning, and then wet cleaning using both a non-ionic and an anionic surfactant to be able to individually clean each of these pieces so that then we could put them back on the chair. So here's hanging up of all the upholstery pieces in my studio, and we went through this systematically, doing all of the parts, all 74 of all the different parts at the same time. One, it helped to keep things consistent, and as well as made things a little cleaner and more organized in my studio. So here's a before and after of the armrest covers. And so for these, took the fabric off, cleaned it. The wood block was still good in there and just covered it with new foam that we carved and then put the fabric back on. For the armrest, any of the feet that were broken, we did stabilize that and re-weld them to make sure that they were sturdy enough, because that was what is really holding the seat together. And then everything was touched up and repainted. Here are the spring arm assemblies. And you can see the before and after with cleaning off all the old grease. And then we had to look at the parts that made up this important part of the chair to make it be able to recline. And any of the parts that were broken, this is where we did have to fabricate new parts. Most everything else in this project is still original. And then put it all back together, repacked it with grease, and put new rubber grease seals. Here's a shot of the ashtrays before and after. And we cleaned everything. So pulled all of that gum, wrappers, chapsticks, barrettes, and, just all kinds of things were pulled out of the ashtrays. And so the ashtrays are original. The main parts were still on the back of the chairs, but the lids were missing. And I worked with a local artist, Ryan Goolsby, in Dallas to fabricate 3D print new ashtray lids. And we decided to just go ahead and put new lids on all of the ashtrays because most of them were missing, and the ones that were left, we were afraid that the public might try and take those. So it was better if they did take something, then they took 3D printed ones, and we'll just make new ones instead of taking the original. So when we 3D printed these, we did leave off the patent information. It's from 1947, and it was for the Lawrence Metal Product Company. For patenting this new Lawrence ashtray receptacle. And so we did leave that off of it. We didn't feel that was too important information for the public. But all the ashtrays, they've got the new 3D printed lid on them. And here's a shot of all of what we saved. So it's about a gallon bag, and it's a little more than halfway full of everything solid that we pulled off of these chairs. And when we were done, I handed it back to Sandra and said, here. She kind of looked at it and was like, oh, okay. But it's there, so if anyone wants to see it, and we have the bag, it still, kind of smells like spearmint. So things you get to do when you're a conservator. So here are the parts after cleaning. So when I was assembling these back together, I decided to tag all the parts as a museum inventory. So if you look at these, the metal, the wood, all the fabric parts, they all are assigned a number for that seat so that if these ever come apart again or are moved, we know which pieces actually originally go to which. And I just use museum standard practices for the different materials of how to identify and how to tag the pieces. So here's what we did. So we cleaned 69 armrests, 68 armrest covers, 10 end caps, 74 upholstered seat backs, 74 upholstered seats, 74 seat pans, 148 spring arm assemblies, and 30 ashtrays. What we ended up replacing was the 30 ashtray lids, 74 seat cushions, because the original ones were too degraded to be able to use. 68 foam armrest blocks, so this is the foam that was inside the armrest. 16 spring in the spring arm assembly, so out of 148, we only needed to replace 16. 1 spring arm outer shell, and that was because the one that it had degraded too much and it had holes in it, and we were afraid that any sort of restoration that we did on this would not be enough to hold in the grease, which was important for that piston system with these spring arms. 148 grease seals, the original rubber ones had all disappeared, and an unknown number of nuts and bolts. So once these were all clean, we packed them up and we brought them back to the MOCR to be reinstalled. So they were delivered on a Tuesday and we finished install by Saturday. No safety training this time. So here again, here's the original, what it looked like in 2014 when I saw it, when they were screaming for their bath. And then here's the 2019 when we got them back into the visitor viewing room. And now you see we actually do have 5 rows, red, orange, red, orange, red. And from all the information that I have found, documentation I've seen, this is the original configuration of these seating, is to have these 2 different colors. So when you come into the room as a visitor, you'll walk through this door, and this starts my number 1, the seat 1 here, all the way up to 74 up here. For what I've been told is if you go to seat 3 here, this is where Queen Elizabeth sat when she came to visit. So if you go in for a visit, you can go sit where the Queen sat. So here we are after the week long, we're done, we're still mostly smiling, just a long week. And as a art conservator, this project, I ran into difficulties personally with this project because not only we were trying to preserve the pieces, but our end goal was the public was going to come and view them. And so the thought of another billion people coming to sit on my freshly cleaned upholstery, putting their feet up, just thinking about gum again, it was a little vexing for me. So when we were finishing up, Sandra came and was talking to us, and she said, you know, this is what Gene Kranz said when he went in and he saw the visitor viewing room for the first time looking into MOCR. And he said he was dazzled with going into this room, that it was overwhelming, and all of a sudden he was 50 years younger and wanted to get back to work. So I was really proud of the work that we ended up doing with these and what we were able to provide for this project, to be able to treat these objects as museum pieces, but then also allow the public to be able to come in and sit, you know, where all the people before them have sat. And so when if you go on the tour this afternoon or tomorrow, you'll be going into the visitor viewing room, and those are the original seats. That's the original upholstery. So I just ask, please be kind, but enjoy the experience. So I wanted to thank some people here for this project, because it was truly a huge multi-people from my group to be able to do these chairs. So I want to thank Uta Company for allowing me to work on this project with them, for Sandra Tetley for all of her help with getting onto campus and everything we needed while trying to get these seats removed and back installed. Brad and Stephanie from Studio 6 Art Conservation for all their hard work on the metal and the wood components. Artist Ryan Goolsby for helping me to 3D print all the lids. For my two assistants, Mia Elvington, Tina Marks, and for my parents, Deanna and Dennis, for all their encouragement through this project, and especially my father, who we lost him in March, and I haven't broken up like this in a while. But he would be here today in the audience because he loves NASA. And so his help on this was really helpful, to be able to not only look at the seats, see where they are now, but to help me figure out how they were actually supposed to be functioning. And so we talked through a lot of the seats, more than I ever want to know. Engineering's not my thing. But to be able to see how these seats were supposed to function and what they are supposed to look like when you go sit in this room and have this visitor experience. So thank you. So that was my work with the seats.